A Story of Christmas by Manly P. Hall. Part 2. Links to the full text of this book and the previous video in the playlist are listed in the description box below. I will continue to upload a new video each day. I think it'll be a total of 6. And then when I am finished with them all, I will stitch them together and make one completed audiobook, and that I will release on Christmas Day. Also, please make sure to take a second, give the video a thumbs up, comment in the comment section below, and share. It helps immensely. Nearly 1,400 years before the birth of Christ, a kindly and gentle human soul ruled over the double empire of Egypt. This was Akhenaten, the pharaoh mystic, who made a wonderful symbol of the sun, with each of its rays ending in a human hand. He called this the Aten, the light of the world, and his meditations he contemplated the goodness of the sun. He was moved to declare that Aten, the glorious disk of day, gave its light to all nations, to all races, and to creatures of every kind. It shone equally upon the just and the unjust, with a beautiful patience. It neither judged nor condemned. It simply gave light and life forever. Akhenaten taught that earthly rulers should be like the sun, and that good men everywhere should share their life and light, for in doing so, they honored the source of their own existence. Because of the mystery of the sun, Akhenaten did not make war on neighboring states, nor would he condemn their gods. Equality was bestowed upon all things by the example of the sun. Every night the sun went to sleep, or some believed it went through the gates of the west to light the underworld, and the earth was darkened. Men feared the dark and the wild animals that roamed in the blackness of night. They huddled in their caves for mutual protection, and later built fires to restore confidence and protect themselves, not only from savage beasts, but from ghosts, specters, and those sad spirits that wandered in the darkness. Human beings could only sleep and pray for the return of light, for when it came, it would restore their spirits and provide the hours necessary for the labors of survival. From the beginning, then, men learned to love light and to fear darkness, and when they prayed for light, they made offerings to the sovereign sun. Even the fires which they built were symbols of the solar power, for these fires took away some of the darkness. The Incas of Peru went so far as to kiss the sunbeams as part of a sacred ritual of veneration to the invisible God, who was made known to them first through the wonders of light. In the course of time, men became more learned, for observation led naturally to reflection. Scholars and sages rose among them, and wonderful religious institutions came into being, and these were served by venerable and venerated priesthoods. These creeds and codes, however, originated in the experience of the human race, and they were closely associated with the sun, the seasons, and the seed. By degrees and by popular consent, and sustained by learned contemplations, the ceremonials of the winter solstice came to take precedence over all other sacred rites. The Magi, living in the valley of the Euphrates, studied the stars and the motions of the heavens from their tall towers in the desert. They measured the seasons, and they discovered the 3 long dark nights which accompanied the winter solstice. They also learned that immediately afterward the days began to lengthen, and they interpreted this phenomenon as a peculiar proof of God's love. They said that the heaven had made a pact and a promise with the earth, and that the world would soon again be green and covered with flowers. So these ancient priests of Persia lit their sacred fires, and all the people rejoiced and did honor the reborn God of light. In Greece there were great processionals of rejoicing. There were midwinter rituals at Delphi celebrating the rebirth of the beautiful deity Dionysus, who was represented as a cradled infant born from the sea. In the great sanctuary of the state mysteries at Eleusis, the holy birth was dramatically reenacted in the quiet hour of midnight. Also at this season, the lusty Romans celebrated their Saturnalia, a long and important festival which terminated on Christmas Eve. In the old calendar, December 25th was marked with the words, quote, Natalis Solis Invicta, end quote, the birthday of the invincible sun. Probably no special calculation was necessary, for everywhere and always, even the ancestors of the Latins had kept the birthday of the solar mystery. This was sufficient to make this time and season unique in the spiritual experience of mankind. This festival was always a kindly occasion. Men, either in gratitude or through fear, were motivated to generous and unselfish actions. It was always the worship of the gods, for the Saturnalia was their birthday. But the enlightened pagan had already learned that the God-fearing must also be the humanity-loving. At the winter solstice, families gathered in solemn celebration. Friends long separated were reunited, and enemies were reconciled. The very spirit of thankfulness was in the air, and it was wise and proper to remember the good things that had come and to plan for a happy future. The priests of ancient Britain were called the Druids, or men of the oak tree. At the winter solstice, these great bearded patriarchs, clad in flowing robes of white, entered their sacred groves to cut mistletoe. They carried knives of beaten gold, and it was their custom to use the white berries and the green leaves of this parasitic plant to make wreaths around the crude monolithic stones of their altars. Salisbury Plain still stands an ancient ring of huge rough stones called Stonehenge, as a continuing reminder of this ancient faith. It was in places like these that the early Britons gathered to venerate the return of the sun. The Druids sent runners across the hills with blazing torches, and with these they lit the new fires on both altar and hearthstone. Through the land flames blazed from the tops of the hills and the depths of the valleys. Watching the shadows cast by the sun, the Druid priest found the certain indication that the solar orb was returning. We have referred to the pre-Christian celebration of the winter solstice festival under the broad heading of, quote, faith, end quote. This is sustained by the attitudes of the worshippers. They regarded the cycle of the sun god as a direct evidence of divine providence. They neither questioned nor doubted, but accepted with complete gratitude the symbol of the divine presence. To them, it was enough to live in the glory of the day, to work and to play according to the seasons and the rules which the invincible sun had established for them. Man lived upon universal bounty. All that he was, he owed to the gods who had created him in their own likeness, and had given him dominion over the land and the sea. Every important work was accomplished by worship, for all that mortals could do was to trust in the divine benevolence. They were not burdened by their faith, but rather they rejoiced in the privilege of being grateful and of revealing in all their labors that certainty that the gods were in the heavens and that all was right within the world. Nearly 20 centuries ago, the Christian faith was brought to a sad and troubled world, in which too many human beings had forgotten to be grateful. Christianity began as a small faith, but mostly local in its sphere of influence. For several centuries, the new faith existed precariously in a pagan atmosphere, and it was not until after the conversion of Constantine Magnus, early in the 4th century, that the religion became safely established. In the early years of the Christian communion, there was no general consensus of opinion as to the month or day of Jesus' birth. Because of this, Christmas was not among the earliest festivals of the Church. It is quite possible that the first converts intentionally refrained from creating a festival to honor the birth of Christ. They had rejected the elaborate pagan ceremonies and did not wish to create a similar celebration of their own. Actually, none of the older fathers seem to have known the month and day of the Nativity. And it has been said that there is no month in the year which some respectable authority has not assigned as the birth month of Jesus. One early writer said that it is generally believed that Christ was born on the 20th of May, and yet another equally devout selected the 10th or the 20th of April. And then there were several groups that were convinced that the Master was born in January. And it remained for Pope Julius, who reigned in the 4th century, to officially assign the date of December the 25th. This leads to the realization that there was a gradual trend toward bringing the birth of Christ into harmony with the greatest celebration known in the ancient world. I have to interject and put a quick reader's note in here. In my opinion, the reason that all of the different speculation and widely vast from one end of the year to the almost the polar opposite of Jesus' birthday is because I believe that literal Jesus never existed. Jesus was in essence, an image and an essence of enlightenment that was coming into man's mind's eye at the time. But that's just my own unasked for opinion. So, end of reader's note. This gradual trend is quite understandable, since it was not the policy of the Church at the time to actually destroy the altars of ancient gods, but it was to cleanse them of their older symbols, and then rededicate them to the Christian faith. It is always easier to accept new doctrines than to change old ways. If these difficulties can be reconciled, then the results are usually fortunate. There were a number of philosopher mystics among the early Christians, and these gradually identified Christ with the Son. They saw in him the light of the world, the greatest light of all time, the true light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Ideas must have symbols so that they can be expressed and more readily communicated. Perhaps the old pagans had mistakenly worshipped the sun without realizing fully the meaning of salvation. Or perhaps they did know, but expressed themselves in unfamiliar terms. So, if Christ was the light of the world, was he not the true sun hero, the light bearer, who was the desired of all nations? As the sun lit the sky and made the earth fruitful, so the Son of Man cast his light into the souls of humanity, making spirits fruitful for good works. Whatever the motive may have been, it was not actually the legislation of men or of priests and bishops that established Christmas. It was an institutional recognition of the appropriateness of the great sun symbolism. In these ways, the first Christians were influenced in their selection of the most proper and fitting day, and by the 5th century A.D., the date of the Christ Mass was almost universally accepted throughout many branches of the Christian faith. Other factors may have also influenced this decision. The first Christians found it expedient to assemble for the celebration of their faith on the festival days of their pagan neighbors. Only on such days could they gather inconspicuously and with slight probability of molestation. Later, they were given official privilege to meet on certain days, but by degrees the emergency measure became an accepted tradition. There was also the fact that the missionaries and the evangelists traveling into distant regions found it much easier to convert the peoples of these lands when they were permitted to preserve their ancient festivals. Right. Perhaps the conversions under these conditions were not as complete as they might have been wished, but at that time it was more important to maintain friendly relations. And we will continue in part 3. I am pretty sure that I've went over my 15-minute mark. But that's it. Until the next time, always remember, love yourselves and love each other unconditionally. Peace.